Right, so now we're into the final two sessions of the conference. Great to see so many of you here still. So we're going to rapid fire through the feedback on the last 6 SDG workshops. So if I could ask our 6 moderators onto the stage, please. We all know the rules now. In order, please, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17, and I'll introduce you once we are seated. And I see we're missing 2. 1. Have we got Stefan? So, we have, let me get out of the way. We have Malavika Bambawale, who is no, she's not. She's the Director and ASEAN Lead for Strategy and Sustainability at Accenture. We have next Nick Sekhran, who you've met many times already. Doug Woodring, who is the co-founder of the Ocean Recovery Alliance. We have Rod Taylor, the Global Director Forest Program for the WRI. We are missing Stefan Priesner, who I think is going to come into the room in a minute. Touch wood, he's got a few. And Jeremy Prepscius, the Vice President for Asia Pac for BSR. So this is the feedback session. You've got your apps all ready. I've been reminded that when you've pressed your number, you need to press submit or you don't actually vote. So remember to go to your, so remember to go to your hamburger, get to the voting point. Yeah, here we are. Here comes Stefan. Come on, Stefan. That's the second time I've missed you out in 2 hours. Right. So we know the rules. 3 minutes, a quick description of what you've been up to. And then the 3 recommendations, and we can then vote. So Malavika, if you want to kick us off and show us how it's done. Thank you.
Sure, thanks, Malcolm. So our group, our session is called Goal 12. Goal 12 is about sustainable, responsible consumption and production. And the 3 recommendations that I have are related with interconnectivity, measurement, and scaling up of initiatives related with this goal. So I'll just go through those very quickly. So the first was interconnectivity. And the recommendation that I am putting up for voting is educating civil society through youth and government engagement. So what we heard actually was that there was a lot of initiatives that were going on separately through governments or through civil societies. But really what was missing was the interconnectivity between governments and civil society, and especially using youth. So, here the question was, for example, civil society might be taking some initiatives, but how can we actually work with government to increase knowledge of what the civil society needs to do so that they are aware and they can improve their impact? Also things like logistics in recycling awareness. So that seems to be a big gap. I think people are not aware of what happens when they recycle. And there, again, it's people's motivation combined with the government's additional push on providing them the knowledge of what happens with recycling logistics. That makes a good combination. And also engaging youth and increasing involvement of the youth of today who can really make a difference and make change last in the future. So that's the first one about interconnectivity, improving interconnectivity between civil society and government. The second point is measurement. So here it was again about consumer awareness. So again, we heard a lot of companies talk about how they are improving their footprint, they are reducing the energy in the products that they produce, they are being environmentally conscious and they are measuring and over time tracking. But again, the thing that's missing in measurement is consumer awareness about their product footprints. So how can we improve that? And the suggestion was consumer awareness about product footprint through labeling. So labeling of the product to increase awareness and knowledge of products so that people can make more informed decisions and giving indicators like energy consumption, for example. And the third was about scaling. How do we scale these initiatives? And again, we heard that, yes, companies are doing this and that and the other, but one of the most interesting suggestions from our discussion was about how to design products to extend their life, right? So how do we design products for more, for second use, third use, more recyclability, et cetera, but not at the expense of the product's life. So that doesn't mean that if you design a recyclable product, it should actually stop working within the first year, but rather, can we modify ownership of products? So can we actually think about giving out products as services where you're renting products rather than just selling them for single use and therefore increasing their lifestyle? And yeah, I see that my time is up, but that was the third one. So redesigning products and changing their ownership.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So we've got our 3 recommendations. Can we get them up on the screen? There we go. Educate civil society, get better linkage between the youth and the government, and consumer awareness about products through labelling, which is around the measurement, and modify to extend product life and recyclability. And your measurement and footprinting is getting a lot of voting. Do we want to keep going? How many we got? We've got more than 73 people in the room. Come on. Remember to hit your submit when you've got your vote. Let's see if we can get over 100, and then we'll get going. Right, we're getting close enough. And we are at 48% on the consumer awareness, better footprinting and labelling. Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Nick,
thank you.
You could probably talk forever on SDG 13, but you've got 3 minutes. Thank you.
Well, we had some fun in our group. We sort of set up a dragon's den, and our facilitators voted on the ideas that came from the participants on the round tables. I'm afraid that these recommendations on the app have been a bit transmogrified and don't quite reflect what we actually discussed, so let me try and explain. The first recommendation was a business vulnerability index to climate change, so we could actually measure the risks that companies face, and this could be published in the public domain. So you actually look business on business, peer to peer, in terms of what relative risk is along the entire supply chain and business footprints. So that was the first, in terms of driving investment and trying to change status quo in high-risk businesses. Second, this one is completely transmogrified, was around creating a Singapore-listed investment vehicle, okay, for renewable energy, for mitigation measures. And the idea here would be to raise money from government, sovereign wealth funds, individuals, and to blend finance together with company funding, and to sort of to raise the game in terms of raising private capital for mitigation measures. And then the third was around regulatory change and the drivers as a driver of investment, but anchored in population support, so linked to an advocacy drive, behavior change, so that regulation and change, such as, for instance, in Singapore, the carbon tax is secure and sustainable over time.
Perfect. Thank you very much indeed. And your business vulnerability index is presumably a bit like the recommendations of the TCFD.
Yes.
The Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. Does everybody know about the TCFD? Anybody hands up? Go and read it. Coming to a country near you very soon. The Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures have got recommendations out which have been endorsed by all of the G20 countries, likely to end up in regulation in the next 2 years, which will do pretty much what Nick is talking about. Okay, so can we get the votes up, please? There we are. Business Vulnerability Index, Singapore-listed investment vehicle, and regulatory change anchored in population support. I think they're reasonably well described. Okay, let's vote. So the Business Vulnerability Index is getting the lead at the moment, being caught a little bit by the regulatory change. Oh no, we're going ahead again. Well,
yes, it's one.
There we go, it's one. There we go. Mr. Bloomberg of Bloomberg, who chaired the TCFD, will be delighted to see that result. So well done, everybody. You're on the right track. Thanks a lot, Nick. Really well done. Great. Doug.
Yes.
SDG 14.
So SDG 14 is a broad coverage of the ocean, but we focus this one on plastic pollution, and therefore we had to go upstream and onto land and talk about how we're going to reduce this. We had a lot of discussion because it's a very complicated issue. Plastic is very diverse and it's hard to recover. So on the interconnectivity point, we talked about the need for roughly something like the trickle-down effect. You often get government regulations at the top federal end, but you don't have connectivity with the smaller municipalities and city governments who act on those regulations, and the private sector not necessarily knowing what their boundaries are. So we need to improve that interconnectivity and working together. On scale, we need financial motivators or value vectors, which is putting a price or a reward on that material. So you either pay to play and you have an extended producer responsibility program or some kind of fee that might be there to motivate, or on the other side you have a reward or a game or something that incentivizes people to bring that material in for collection. And that can improve recycling and capture of this resource. On the measurement side, trust and transparency came out, and we realized there needs to be baseline data on what is being recovered, what is the current state of affairs, what the impacts are locally, and then have the community trust that the systems are working in that jurisdiction where they live. Today, a lot of that trust does not exist. People don't think recycling systems work. They don't see it happening. They don't necessarily trust the private sector who claims to be doing certain things, and we need to increase that visibility so that people believe the measurement and can, expand on those programs. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Those three feel slightly connected as well, because you need the measurement to build the trust, and that was his first point, and you probably need some measurement to drive some incentives as well. So can we have the recommendations up on the screen? There we go. Interconnectivity, financial motivations and incentives and trust and transparency with data. Keep voting, everybody. It looks like we've got a clear winner there. Interesting. I wonder whether the trickle down is getting less votes because you need the measurement first before people will build that. Any more to vote? It'll stay open so you can vote a bit more later, but I think we've got a clear winner there. Brilliant. There we go. So we think we're wanting financial incentive, which is probably where most governments will be looking as well. Right. Excellent. Thanks a lot. Brilliant, Doug. Thank you. Rod, SDG 15 and life on land.
Yes, so SDG 15 is really about land-based ecosystem services and maintaining or restoring those. And the first one we had came out of some of the case studies we had around the region, where there was generally one of the issues was community resistance to whatever the objectives of the project were. And so the first one we came up with is that companies, particularly where involved in these projects, give equal attention to the business case and the unique aspirations of the communities around them. The second one was recognizing that we had some great success stories from businesses involved in these projects. And that was probably because businesses tend to have fairly good land management capacity that's often lacking in government or where governance is weak in remote areas and so on. And so the second one is to spotlight these success stories in the hope that they'll inspire more. These are cases where business is involved in the conservation or restoration activities. And then the third one, we recognize that SDG 15 is one of the less popular ones. And given that most food-based, fiber-based, water-based, or energy-based industries depend on those ecosystems, we're a bit surprised by this. So our strategy is to highlight the dependencies of business on these ecosystem services rather than the impacts business has on the ecosystems. And that is a way to drive more buy-in from business and government.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Rod. Really well done. And I like your last point about highlighting dependency. Our sense is a lot of businesses aren't really thinking that way when they select their SDGs. They're thinking about their operation, not what they're dependent on. So, right. 3 there to vote on. Looks like you and I were on the right track there. 57% on highlight the dependencies. So get people and keep voting, everybody, and it's going up as we speak. Slam dunk. Yeah, so interesting, featuring the success stories, not scoring so much. Balancing community aspirations. I loved all 3 of those, they're great. And the ecosystem dependency is getting even bigger. There you go, you have a remit, Rod. Okay, thank you very much. Stefan, SDG 16.
SDG 16. We had a fantastic discussion on a difficult topic because SDG 16 is about peaceful, inclusive and just societies. But before we came into the 3 solutions, we also mentioned that it is a key enabler for all the other SDGs. It is in fact, it's the SDG that is by definition the way to upscale all the other SDGs through a legislative framework, through incentive systems. And in that light, we came to 3 recommendations. Our recommendation on scale is to link the UN guiding principles on business and human rights to the SDGs. We believe that there are some very concrete targets that make some of the broad SDG targets more meaningful and easier to implement. And they are obviously fully in line with the SDGs. Our recommendation on interconnectivity was to provide triangular solutions between linking targets from certain SDGs to SDG 16, and we used the example of birth registration, which is 16-4, and the link to a reduction of child marriage, a reduction of child trafficking, and use technology in cooperation with institutions that are supposed to do child registration, but for different reasons don't do it. There is apparently very, very good examples of using mobile technology to facilitate child registration and birth registration. Our recommendation on measurement, number 3, was again to make use of technology, connectivity, and activate participation, basically make participation meaningful through modern technology by validating the implementation of other SDGs, because it's easy for governments to say, I have implemented target 135 on SDG 15, but this should be validated by the user, by the recipient of these solutions, and obviously mobile technology can be a fantastic tool to have real-time surveys whether this really happened or whether some adjustments need to be made. My last point, and I have 12 seconds, SDG 16 absolutely key to link the top-down delivery towards rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think, as you said, SDG 16 is a cover for everything else. Without a stable society, how do we get the other stuff going? I agree entirely, and actually the things you've been talking about link really well with what Joseph was just talking about, role of big data, role of technology, getting this stuff going. So can we have the recommendations up, please? What do you think is the best? Implement human rights into the SDGs, link SDG 16 with other goals, or use technology for participation. We've got 72, come on, if we can get a bit more voting, don't forget to press the submit button when you've voted, otherwise you don't count. Are you not voting because you're finding it confusing? Oh no, you're starting to vote again. Well done. And again, we're getting the 58% on the participation. So this is the use of technology to get real-time feedback. Excellent, we'll call it there. Thank you very much. And so last but certainly not least, Jeremy, SDG 17, and you'll probably argue that's the most important SDG, but partnerships.
Well, SDG 17 is the SDG that allows us to pull together all of these other actions, SDGs, and everything else into real action, and that's really important. Just a quick shout out to my panelists, Francine Pickup from UNDP Indonesia, Lim Shuling from Golden Agri, Mike Tuffrey from Corporate Citizenship, and Matt Kovac from the Food Industry Asia. We had a great panel and we talked about the challenges, the opportunities, and the learnings that come from partnership. And they helped me put together these 3. They're on your app. Let me contextualize what they are a little bit more. The first one is about engaging people as individuals with their own data to allow them to drive real and increasing impact. And how do you think about that? Well, it could be the data of the electrical draw of your house. So you could compete against your kids' classmates at school or whatever it may be, so that suddenly that is alive. Which has 2 interesting impacts. And one is it creates local constituencies for the impacts that we're trying to change through these goals. And the second one, it wouldn't be maybe me telling my kids to turn off the lights in their room all the time. The second one is also really interesting. And what we were talking about is Failure is important. What we're trying to do is difficult. How do we achieve this? And actually, failure is learning. Failure can be success because it allows us to start over again. And one of the things that we're talking about was really learn from the startup world, apply partnership creation through this model of fast learning and fast failure in small, brief, quick steps, so we can stop and start over and learn and continue to grow. The third one, which is also really interesting because the Unleash presentation we just heard certainly struck a nerve with this, which is how do we create a center for partnership ambition? Where does ambition sit? Where are the unusual and unconventional partners? Who should you be thinking about differently with the opportunity of achieving the impact behind that SDG, that goal, that interconnection? And what we saw a little bit about Unleash is part of that, but how do we take that even further? So it's where can we find, call it the ambition to drive change in unique and unconventional ways. So those are the three ideas, thank you.
Fantastic. Varied, but all engaging with people and trying to work out how we get that engagement. Can we get the slides up, please? So, use of data to drive real impact, get your kids involved, learn from fast failure, I like that one. The Americans will go with that one. Find unconventional partners through your center. So we've got 104 votes already. We got one which isn't scoring quite as well, but other two, they like them. Brilliant. We've got through that as we wanted. Every one of you under 3 minutes. Thank you very much indeed, panel. And if we could give them a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you.